let us begin, Judd, with the scenario I laid out for Sage Rosenfels, and I want your response to this as well. If the Vikings go to Chicago and Kirk Cousins does not play well at all, struggles, turns the ball over, does not come through with some sort of big touchdown, even in a big moment, but the Vikings win because Mitch Trubisky is just bad at football now, how are we going to feel about this team? If they win the way that they have won basically in the first two victories, which is Dalvin Cook and defense, and Kirk Cousins hasn't had to do a lot, though he's been good when he's been asked. If he plays similar to Green Bay, but they come away with a win, which almost happened, give Dalvin Cook or Alexander Madison the football at the 8-yard line and you win that game. Let's say that the same thing plays out, and I could very much see this, and the Vikings win 17-13 or something. Dalvin goes for 120. Kirk is bad. What are we going to think about that?
Well, we are going to think that the quarterback is not good, which might be to a certain degree accurate. But I think what we're going to be sold and what the fan base also is going to come back with is the 2019 formula for the Vikings works, which I would still be reluctant to confirm because you're certainly going to play teams that will be superior offensively and overall probably to the Bears. But I think we are going to take, and if they had won in Green Bay, same thing, Matthew, some type of false sense of security and say, you see, it works for sure. Now, if they win in Chicago, I'm impressed because they don't ordinarily win there, and it's a tough place to play, and the Bears defense is very good. But all those things being said, I think we might lull ourselves into saying, well, this really, really might work. And then you get to a game like Kansas City or Dallas, and you're going to find out that it really might not work.
That's exactly the way that I would think of it. Is this game is very winnable without a great performance or even a good performance by Kirk Cousins. If they go to Chicago and just maul Mitch Trubisky and he gets rattled and he throws a couple picks. Last year, Trubisky tried his best to give that game away, threw 2 interceptions to Anthony Harris when they were winning, which, I mean, is just abysmal. And the way that he's played in most of the 2 games he played against the Vikings and the 2 that he played last year, he hasn't been good a single time. He wasn't even good in week 17, but he made a couple of plays at the right time, had a couple of good runs, and that was just about enough to beat the Vikings in both games because Chicago's defense was so good. I don't think Chicago's defense exactly can win them as many games as they did last year because they had all the turnovers, but they're still vicious. They're still very good. It's just that Trubisky seems to be getting worse, and we'll see how we feel about this tomorrow after they play tonight. So if Trubisky is bad and they win with a decent amount of running and they just keep the score low and Cousins doesn't show a whole lot, I think we're still going to feel about the same as we did coming away from Green Bay, only it won't be quite the mass hysteria, but it will be still you need a big performance from him in a big game against a tough team at some point to ever believe you can win, because the last time I checked, the good teams are in the playoffs.
Well,
right?
Yeah, yes and no. Yes, ultimately, that you would think that if you're going to, let's say, go into Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs or Jerry World and beat the Cowboys, that Kirk Cousins is going to have to emerge. But Matthew, it's quite plain as day to see now that the plan here, the Zim plan, does not involve that. Like, right or wrong, it could be incredibly flawed, but it's as if Mike has convinced himself, I have my hands on the 85 Bears, and damn it, that's going to be us. And so my problem is this. Kansas City, for instance, I don't think that this formula with this personnel works there, which is why I said on Vent Line today, this is where I really think that if you're Mike, you need to go into Rick's office and say, Jalen Ramsey, the only way I feel comfortable going into Kansas City or the playoffs is, all right, Pat Mahomes, here is one of the upper echelon top cornerbacks who's coming at you. But from the day that DeFilippo was fired to Mike incessantly talking last year at the podium about the run, and I want to establish the run, and I want my defense off the field. Like the plan, Kirk talked yesterday about our identity. Kirk, I could have told you what the desired identity was weeks ago in training camp. I'm surprised you're not throwing it a little bit more, but I'm not shocked. Are you?
No, I'm not. I mean,
I thought he'd throw a little bit more.
The way that the games have played out that they've won, of course, I'm not surprised that they decided to run all the time because the games were over. And I almost have to throw out these two games for what they look like on offense because it just doesn't mean anything. I mean, when Atlanta gives you interceptions, they let a punt get blocked, and they no-show entirely. I can't really analyze the quarterback too much.
I got a question for you. Do you think that Mike, after Green Bay and and first of all, the pass protection breaks down, Kirk throws the terrible pass. Do you think Mike felt even more emboldened as they watched that film back to say, see what happens?
Maybe. I think that Zimmer knows that if Kirk Cousins does not perform at a high level at different points in the season, especially when games are the biggest, that they're not going to win anything. I mean, I know that people want Zimmer to be like Mike Ditka or something in their minds of, he's just this old crotchety, wants to run the ball, wants to win 6-3. I know that that's how he is sometimes painted. My thing is more that everything that he has said has indicated that he doesn't trust the quarterback.
Right.
Because if you gave Mike Zimmer Patrick Mahomes, he would definitely not be saying, let's run the ball, run the ball, run the ball.
I'm saying that. I'm saying what you just said.
Yeah, I think it all shows a lack of trust for Kirk Cousins, and the game in Green Bay just confirmed, and I can guarantee they won't do that again in a big situation. They will hand the ball to Dalvin Cook, at least on first and second down. But I think it just confirmed what he thought from last year and probably what he thought from Washington. I wouldn't be surprised if he watched all those games, which they claim they watch every game he's ever played, like 2012 would really help you. But that's what they said. So you think that he watched those games and didn't see the same thing I saw and brought up to you last year on this radio station, which had a different name at that point? But, you know, I was bringing up like this guy really struggles in these big games and he seems to have kind of an anxiety about him. And he isn't a guy that motivates the troops to get on his back and everybody to raise their level of play. Like this is not the guy that you had in Teddy Bridgewater. And Bridgewater, you could call him a game manager if you want, but he had a different element of that where when you were in the close game, you were going to come out a winner more often than not with him. And even he shows it going into Seattle yesterday and beating a team that never loses in Seattle in September. And yet he doesn't put up crazy numbers. He just got his team ahead and kept them there. And with Cousins, I think after seeing Bridgewater for those years, that's what Mike Zimmer said. This is my perfect quarterback. This is my Jim McMahon, if you want to keep that Bears comparison. And with Cousins, he's the opposite of all of that stuff. So, no, he doesn't trust him. And of course, he wants to keep the ball in Dalvin Cook's hands. But he also is well aware, and this is my point, he's well aware and has alluded to it a number of times that Detroit's got a good defense. Chicago has a good defense. Dallas has an amazing defense. Seattle's not going to be easy to beat. Los Angeles has those great edge rushers that are going to get after you. If you are going to be a great team, which this team has the potential to be that, Kirk Cousins has to show that he can win in big games and make big plays. There's no two ways around it if you want to be a great team. Look at Dak Prescott right now. Dallas has as good of a defense as the Vikings. Dak Prescott right now after 3 games, 920 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 picks. He's been sacked twice and has 128 quarterback rating. That's the guy you got to beat if you want to win the NFC. Like, okay, Kirk is going to have every opportunity to show that he could do that. But you were focusing on the Kansas City game.
Yeah.
I'm focused on the Dallas game eventually when we get there. And I know it's a ways down the road. On the road at Dallas, national TV. Because guess what? Playoff games are on national TV too. So if you're going to prove that you can really play, I'm not even sure that Chicago is going to be the best test. I'll have a better feel after tonight when they play Washington. But
if they win in Chicago, I give them credit because they have struggled there so often. But yes, Chicago's not a great team. But if you beat Chicago, if you beat the Bears in Chicago, the way I see this game, you're basically playing what amounts to, in 2019 at least, sort of a mirror image of your own team.
Yeah.
And it comes down, and sadly, it comes down to this. Which not great quarterback screws up less?
And which great defense makes a play to score a touchdown? Probably it's what's going to take.
If they win 17-14 and a touchdown for the Vikings comes from a Harrison Smith pick of Trubisky, I'm going to not be surprised. I'll be impressed, but I won't be surprised.
I guess I just wonder what the general feeling is going to be from Vikings fans if we're talking about a Cousins win in Chicago, which would be really huge for this team. I mean, if you go into week 4, first quarter of the season, and you are 3-1, even though the loss was as hideous as it looked in Green Bay with the late game interception, you would still feel absolutely thrilled because we looked at this first section of the season and we said, this is a section where you could easily start to fall behind in the NFC North if Atlanta comes in here and does anything. If you lose at Green Bay, if you lose at Chicago, and then you're 1-3, and you have to go through that hellacious run of Kansas City, Dallas, Seattle, and then those division games at the end, you're really going to be in tough. And to come out of this 3-1, you would be looking at this team like they're one of the best in the NFL, that they were one bad throw away from being 4-0 in their first 4 games. But everything now has come down to, I think, the team is great. It's maybe as good as it was. We're very close, 2017. But the fact that Dalvin Cook is healthy, the fact that they have Irv Smith, who has really impressed me over the first few weeks, they might be better. I mean, now that Mike Hughes is coming back, you're completely healthy on defense. Everson Griffin looks just as good or better than he did 2 years ago. You're talking about a lot of those same elements put in the pot with even better options on offense with Irv Smith here and Alexander Madison here,
Sure.
and Dalvin Cook playing the way he does. It really is going to all be about whether the quarterback can show up in these big games. And I want to know if we feel like we're going to learn anything this week with the way that he plays in Chicago. If he goes to Chicago and beats them and plays well or doesn't play well, is that going to be our, wow, this guy can do it type of thing? Or is it going to be, hey, good for you, but they're not as good as they used to be, so whatever, on to the next one?
This is the game where I firmly believe the game plan will be, again, to manage Kirk. Dalvin will run a ton. Kirk will throw. In their ideal world, now, when you get to the KC and Dallas games, this dynamic might change. But I think Sunday in Soldier Field, Kirk throws about 25 times tops. If he throws more, they're going to consider the plan failed. So I don't think they're going to allow us to learn more about Kirk, because I think what they know about Kirk keeps them up at night and scares them.
It's all going to depend. The number of throws is all going to depend on just how the game goes.
But their goal is going to be to control the game as much as possible, to score first, and then milk that lead as long as they possibly can. But until you get to a dynamic team, I think the goal is going to say, we're going to take the game out of Kirk's hands as much as possible. And if somebody says, but why, Zimmer's going to say, Green Bay. That's what's going to. And so I don't think we get answers until you go play the Chiefs, probably, and I have no clue what happens